Hello, my name is Giselle, and at my parents' housewarming, they handed me a folding chair in the garage as if I didn't exist inside my own family. Everyone else was inside laughing, toasting, celebrating, while I stood alone, invisible. But it wasn't just the garage. It was every erased memory, every unacknowledged sacrifice I'd made for them. How could the people who were supposed to love me treat me like I was nothing? And when I finally decided to step back inside, to claim what was mine, what I uncovered left every single one of them stunned. What would you do if your own family tried to write you out of your life? The Texas heat hadn't yet kicked in that morning. Early spring in Austin meant birdsong still outnumbered sweat, and the breeze had a soft citrus scent from the neighbor's lemon tree. I pulled into the curved driveway of my parents' new house, more like Callista's palace if you asked me. It had been 2 years since I bought this house for them. The mortgage was under my name, the down payment had drained my bonus check from a merger deal I worked 12-hour days for, and still, I'd said nothing. I wanted them to feel like it was their home, not a gift with strings. But today, as I stepped out of my Prius in a neatly pressed navy dress, something felt off. No one came out to greet me. A few cars lined the curb. Someone had stuck balloons on the mailbox, one of them already sagging in the sun. I grabbed the bottle of water I'd brought and headed up the walkway. A cousin passed me at the door with a red plastic cup in hand. He looked me up and down like I was a guest from HR and muttered, "Oh, you're out in the garage." I paused. "I'm sorry, what?" He gestured vaguely. "They set up your seat out back. In the garage, I think. It's cooler there." "Cooler, huh?" That's what they were going with. I didn't say a word, just smiled. "Got it." And I turned toward the side of the house. The garage door was propped open with a half brick. Inside, a dusty folding chair sat next to a lawn table beside the recycling bins. One lonely cooler hummed in the corner. I sat. My dress creased under me like it didn't want to be there either. From where I sat, I could hear laughter from inside, the clinking of dishes. Someone shouted, "More guac! Callista! You nailed it!" Of course. I took a sip from my water bottle, then another. I placed it back in my purse like it was the only thing I owned that remembered I was human. People walked past the open garage door, heading in and out of the house. Some nodded at me. One uncle mumbled, "Didn't recognize you at first," and kept walking. No one invited me in. A few minutes later, a little boy wandered into the garage with his dad. He looked up at me, tilted his head, and asked with full sincerity, "Are you the valet?" His dad chuckled, said nothing. I smiled, trying not to let the heat in my chest reach my face. "No, sweetheart, I'm just family." The father didn't apologize, didn't even flinch, just pulled his son's hand and walked on. I sat back in the chair. My legs were starting to stick to the metal. The overhead light flickered like even it wasn't sure if it wanted to be on. Then I heard my name from inside. I stood. Noticed the kitchen window was open, just a crack. I crept a little closer. Inside, the entire family had gathered for a photo. Callista at the center, her arms around our parents. Above them, a glitter banner read, "Thank you, Callista." There was no mention of me. I took a step back and hit the recycling bin with my heel. The noise startled a woman passing by, who looked in. I smiled politely. She didn't smile back. In 2022, after Dad's early retirement and Mom's health scare, I'd offered to handle the housing. They'd been renting, prices were rising, I had the means. It wasn't a big speech, just a quiet offer after dinner. They cried, hugged me, said, "You saved us." But I'd asked, begged really, that no one make a fuss. I didn't want resentment from Callista or extended relatives. I thought my discretion would preserve peace. Instead, it made me disappear. I sat back down and checked my phone. A few unread work emails, one from a client on the East Coast asking for edits. I swiped it away. The breeze had turned a bit cooler, but not enough to chase the bitterness out of my mouth. I saw Aunt Sheila pass by, balancing a tray of cupcakes. She didn't even glance at me. I fixed my jacket even though it wasn't cold, straightened my posture, took another sip of water. In my head, I rehearsed the same line I always did at events like this. "It's just a party. Smile. Don't let them win by breaking you. But something about today was different. The way the laughter rolled out of the house but stopped just short of the garage. The way no one corrected the valet comment. The way the banner spelled Callista like it was engraved in marble. This wasn't an accident. This was how they saw me. Or rather, how they didn't. I heard footsteps behind me. A neighbor, maybe. I turned, hopeful. "Hi, are you parking cars?" she asked. That was it. I stood up, adjusted my purse strap, and walked straight toward the house. Not to join the party, but to leave it. But when I heard my name left out of the welcome speech, I realized I was never invited to belong. For a moment, I stood still, halfway between leaving and hoping someone, anyone, might stop me. But no one noticed. My heels clicked softly against the driveway as I turned toward the garage again, a retreat not out of weakness, but because I needed to breathe. I needed space to figure out why I felt like a ghost in a place I helped build. I leaned against the side of the garage, just close enough to hear the faint buzz of a microphone being tested. Applause broke out inside, and I craned my neck slightly, watching through the open blinds of the living room window. Mom was standing at the front of the room, holding a piece of paper in her hand. Her voice came through the small speakers, bright and familiar. "We want to thank everyone for coming today to celebrate this new chapter in our lives," she began. People clapped again. I waited, expecting a nod to everyone involved, a vague, "we're blessed with amazing children," or something. Instead, she smiled toward Callista, who stood at her side, practically glowing. And a very, very special thanks to my daughter Callista, who not only helped us find this beautiful home, but made sure everything today went off without a hitch. She handled the decorating, the guest list, the food. She's been our rock. Rock. That word echoed in my head louder than the applause that followed. I could feel the air shift around me, that surreal sensation when something so intimate unfolds just feet away, but you're watching from the outside like a stranger. My fingers tightened around the water bottle I'd been holding. I brought it to my lips just to do something, but the water had gone warm. I set it down on the folding chair and listened harder, praying I had just missed my mention. The speech kept going. Stories about Callista growing up, her natural flair for design, how she'd always known how to bring people together. Not a single word about me, not even a vague reference, not even a "we're grateful to all our children." Nothing. When the clapping subsided and the music picked up again, I turned to my cousin Angie, who had just wandered out toward the driveway for a smoke break. She noticed the tension on my face. "Did she mention me?" I asked, softly. Too softly, maybe. Angie blinked. "What?" "In the speech. My name. Did she say it?" Her lips pressed together. "No, but maybe she forgot. I mean, there were a lot of people." "Maybe she forgot." "My mother?" "The woman I wire transferred closing costs for last year while juggling back-to-back client meetings." I didn't respond, just nodded. Angie lit her cigarette and looked toward the house. "People forget stuff," she added weakly. "Doesn't mean anything." It meant everything. A few minutes passed. I needed to move. I didn't want to sit again in that sad garage seat, so I stepped toward the front of the driveway, staring at the hydrangeas I'd paid a landscaper to plant just last week. Their vibrant blues and purples looked fake, like decorations at a wedding I wasn't invited to. A black SUV pulled up slowly. Out stepped a middle-aged man with a sun hat and mirrored sunglasses. He glanced around, clearly late, probably trying to find parking. Then he looked directly at me. "Excuse me," he said, walking up with his keys in hand. "Can I leave these here?" I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "You're valet, right?" he asked, confused by my hesitation. My mouth opened, but for a second no words came out. "No, I don't work here," I said, finally. He flushed. "Oh, sorry. You looked like—" He didn't finish. He walked past, slipping the keys back into his pocket. I didn't call after him. I didn't say it was fine, because it wasn't. I didn't look like I belonged. I didn't dress like the princess of the hour. I hadn't curated a themed snack table or made place cards. I had simply paid for the house and shown up. Back at the garage, I sat down, but only for a minute. My body was buzzing, like I was too big for my own skin. Maybe Mom was nervous. Maybe she meant to say my name but forgot. Maybe she was trying to keep things simple. Maybe Callista asked her not to mention me. So it doesn't look like we're favoring money over effort, I could almost hear her saying. I was coming up with excuses faster than I could finish each one. Excuses for people who never made any for me. Why was I the one justifying their silence? Then came the whispers. Through the window, I heard someone say, "Isn't it weird Giselle's not here?" A woman replied, "I thought she moved away. Or maybe she didn't want to come." "No," said another voice. "I think Callista bought the house for them. She's always been so generous." I gripped the edge of the chair, my knuckles white. Truth was being rewritten in real time. Outside, the sun had shifted angles. The light now stretched longer across the driveway. A few guests stepped out to get some air, holding drinks, laughing. One of them, a neighbor I vaguely recognized, nodded toward me politely, then glanced inside like they weren't sure if I was family or staff. I didn't blame them. I stood again, restless. From where I was, I could see through the large living room window. Inside, Callista was standing next to our father, one hand on his shoulder. Guests surrounded them, smiling, talking, admiring, and then she saw me. Our eyes locked, and she smiled, not the bright, candid grin she gave the photographers earlier. This one was softer, more deliberate. She'd been using that smile since we were kids. When she beat me at board games and told me I was a good sport. When she wore my favorite sweater and said, "You weren't using it." When she told my ex-boyfriend at Christmas that I was married to work. That smile didn't mean hello, it meant checkmate. I didn't smile back. That's when I realized this wasn't just about one party, this was about rewriting the truth. I stepped back from the window, slowly, like if I moved too fast, I'd shatter the thin layer of disbelief still clinging to me. That smile from Callista had pierced deeper than she would ever know, or maybe exactly as deep as she intended. My heels crunched lightly against the gravel as I made my way toward the backyard, needing space from the walls that held so many voices that didn't include mine. My breath felt shallow. The air had thickened, or maybe it was just the weight of clarity settling in. I stood under the edge of the patio's shadow, behind a cluster of potted rosemary and lemon balm, where no one could see me. From here, I could still hear the faint hum of conversation and the occasional clink of glassware, like wind chimes for a party I didn't belong to. "They're erasing me," I whispered to myself. "They're using everything I gave them to celebrate someone else." It wasn't jealousy. I had outgrown that long ago. It was the deeper betrayal, the kind that makes you doubt your own sanity, your own memories, the kind that isn't loud or dramatic, but quiet, calculated, and cruel. Just then, my phone buzzed in my purse. I reached in, glad for the distraction. I expected it to be a colleague or maybe an alert from my meditation app reminding me to breathe. It was a text from Mom. At first, I smiled, hoping for an apology, a check-in, even something as simple as "come inside." But then I read it. "Make sure she doesn't stir anything up. Let her sit in the garage like last time." My stomach dropped. I reread the message. Once, twice. It had been sent to me, by mistake. Maybe it was meant for Callista, or Aunt Sheila, or who knows who else was part of this family theater. I stared at the screen, feeling like someone had slapped me across the face. The kind of slap you don't feel on your skin, but in your bones. It wasn't an oversight. It wasn't forgetfulness. They planned this. My fingers trembled, but I didn't cry. Not because I didn't want to, but because something colder was rising inside me, steadier than sadness, sharper than shame. I tucked the phone back into my purse and started walking, now with more intention. I followed the edge of the house, where the windows grew smaller and the walls narrowed into the side entrance near the kitchen. As I rounded the corner, I heard voices. I froze. Two women were speaking in hushed tones, barely above whispers, but clear enough through the cracked window of the pantry. "She's too soft to fight," said one voice. "Callista's. She'll just sit there, smile, and leave. She always does." The other voice laughed, I recognized it. My sister-in-law, Naomi, married to my brother Jacob. She used to be kind. Or at least I thought she was. Honestly, Naomi said, it's like she volunteers to be invisible, makes things easier for the rest of us. I didn't move. Couldn't. The words weren't just mean. They were strategic. They weren't said in frustration or heat. They were said like conclusions, agreed-upon truths. I stepped back quietly, as if even the ground shouldn't know I was there. I returned to the corner of the house and leaned against the wall, the bricks hot from the sun but strangely grounding. It wasn't just about today. Not anymore. They had always seen me this way, conveniently silent, generous but dispensable. The girl who handled the bills but didn't need applause. The daughter who understood, which really meant the one we don't have to treat well. Would they notice if I left? Would they care? Would anyone follow me out? A memory flickered, one I hadn't visited in years. I was 16, sitting in the back seat of Dad's old sedan, driving home from a school recital. Callista had sung a solo, off-key but confident. Everyone had clapped. Mom had cried. I had worked for weeks helping set up the stage, printed the programs, made the decorations. No one mentioned it. On the drive home, I'd finally asked, "Did you like the banner?" Mom had turned to me and said, "You're the quiet one, Giselle. Be grateful." I remember shrinking into the seatbelt. Not out of hurt, but because I believed her. That's where it began. The silence, the permission to fade. But now I saw it for what it was. I looked up at the sky, soft blue, some clouds now rolling in from the west. The sun dipped lower. A cooler breeze lifted the edges of my jacket. The yard was still buzzing. Laughter, clinking glasses, the low hum of music. But none of it touched me. I scanned the space. My father, standing by the grill with a beer, chatting with an old neighbor. My brother, filming the event on his phone, narrating like it was a documentary. Here's Callista with the cake she made from scratch. Unreal. My cousin, live streaming her outfit on Instagram. No one looked at me. I felt like a ghost at my own funeral, present, but already grieved over. I don't belong here, I thought. And this time it wasn't a question. Not just physically, spiritually, emotionally. I turned toward the street. For a moment, I imagined walking straight to my car, starting the engine, driving back to my apartment in downtown Austin, where the silence was at least honest. But then something stopped me, a quiet voice inside, firmer than it had ever been. Not like this. If I was going to leave, it wouldn't be because they pushed me out with silence. It wouldn't be as the valet they mistook me for, or the ghost they hoped I'd become. It wouldn't be today. I adjusted my purse strap, wiped my hands on the side of my dress, and stood up straighter. They thought I was invisible, but I'd spent my whole life building things without recognition. It was time they saw what I looked like when I decided to stop being convenient. If I was going to leave, it wouldn't be quietly. And it wouldn't be now. I leaned my forehead against the cool glass of the front door, the sound of laughter and dinnerware clinking inside feeling distant, like a radio playing down the hall. The day's light was fading, late afternoon turning into early evening, and I could smell the roses my landscaper planted week before last. They smelled like promise once. Now they smell like a reminder. Inside, guests mingled under warm chandelier light. Children held cupcakes, wives adjusted shawls. Everyone posed for photos. I stepped in, quietly, as though I might disappear if I moved too fast. I wanted to see how far they'd drawn the lines around me. The entryway was alive with framed photographs, century-old prints, portraits of grandparents, of weddings, graduation caps, smiling faces under linens. I walked slowly, my footsteps soft against the hardwood floor. I touched one frame, carefully, a somewhat dusty snapshot of my graduation day. I remembered that day. Dad sitting in the front row, Mom with tears in her eyes, Callista hugging me afterward, saying, "You did great. That photo was mine." Except it wasn't there. In that spot now was a photo of Callista at a charity gala, her hand raised, glass in mid-toast, perfect dress, perfect hair, perfect lighting. I swallowed. My throat felt full. The frame that once held my picture held someone else's identity now. I kept walking. A guest paused beside me, an acquaintance from my father's old law firm. "That space looks amazing," he said, referring to the living room. "Callista designed so much, didn't she?" Callista, standing near the large bay window, nodded appreciatively. "Thank you." Her voice warm. The guest smiled at her, not at me, not a glance. I stepped back. Legally, the deed was mine. I had signed the papers. I had paid the down payment. I had insisted the title remain in my name. I remembered wire transfers, late-night calls to escrow offices, printing checks. Emotionally, I'd become a visitor. Through the kitchen, I passed a group of aunts and neighbors. One of them whispered about how wonderful everything looked, how Callista had put so much care into choosing the paint, the furniture, inviting people, arranging florals. "She made this home feel like a magazine spread," someone said. My breath caught. I furnished much of that room. I paid for that sofa. I curated those throw pillows. I agonized over the paint swatches. I didn't say anything. I stood by the pantry door, listening. They spoke of Callista that afternoon, as if they had watched a home be built by sculpted hands. My hands, invisible, used, unnamed. I closed my eyes for a moment. I heard my mother's voice, years ago, whispering over a gala program. "You're too quiet, Giselle. We need someone who takes the spotlight." I believed that too, once. I believed that quiet was honorable. Disappearing was sacrifice. A bell rang at the front door. New guests arriving. I took a step toward the window, watching them hang coats in the foyer. They followed light. They followed the beautiful faces and the welcoming smiles. I followed shadows. Callista passed me in the hallway, carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She didn't nod, but she touched my arm briefly. "Don't worry about the photo thing," she said. "I'll make sure someone snaps one with you tomorrow." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to accept that maybe this gap in the album was oversight, not omission, but her eyes betrayed her. They were soft but cold, almost rehearsed. She stepped away immediately, offering the tray elsewhere. I stood in the hallway, chest tight. The room smelled like vanilla candles and baked potatoes. A faint melody of "Somewhere Over the Rainbow" played on the speakers. I moved toward a small corner table. On it were stacks of family albums, binding cracked, corners frayed. I opened the top one, wedding photos from decades ago, my grandfather holding my mother on his lap, my mother holding me when I was a toddler. I flipped fast. There were entries for Callista's baby showers, for her high school prom, for her scholarship award, but nothing after I bought the house. My family heirlooms beautifully preserved. My contributions carefully hidden in financial ledgers, emails, but erased here in memory. Something inside me hardened. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over the voice memo app. I asked myself, what's my truth? What do I want to hold on to? The memory of last year came back sharply. Mom tearing up at a fundraiser, crediting Callista for the idea, the graphics, the storyline, everything that I drafted behind closed doors. Callista standing beside her, smiling just right, looking proud. And I watched from backstage, tethered to wires and deadlines. In that moment, I realized name and face didn't matter, as long as no one saw what I built. I closed the album softly, placed the photos back. I straightened, my shoulders back. I walked to the guest room, found a quiet corner, logged into my email. I started attaching the receipts, furniture invoices, bank statements, email threads. I sent them to myself, responding to an old message about the house foundation with a file titled "Property Records, Keep Safe." I didn't feel tears. I felt resolve. Through the doorway, I saw my father talking with a neighbor, pointing out a framed photo of Callista and Mom at a ribbon-cutting ceremony. He was using words like, "Our family shines." I should have interrupted. I wanted to, but didn't. Just then, Callista appeared behind me. She had a wine glass in hand. Her dress flowed like she'd rehearsed this moment. Her lips curved polite, but not genuine. "You're looking at that old one," she said, indicating the album. "It's just one picture, Giselle. Doesn't define everything." I turned slowly, meeting her gaze. I let nothing in my voice but quiet firmness. Some things define more than one picture, I said. Presence defines them too. Her smile flickered. She had no words. I stepped past her into the hallway, toward the front porch. The dusk was settling, warmth lingering on the bricks. They built a perfect home by deleting me, but I remember everything. If you do that again. The sunlight was fading fast, leaving long shadows across the driveway and brushing the garage door with an amber glow. I had stepped back inside for a few moments after documenting the absence of my presence in the house, but now I found myself once more in the garage. Not the garage of defeat, but of planning. My phone in hand, emails forwarded and receipts carefully compiled, I felt a strange combination of rage and purpose settle into me. Every step I had taken, every dollar I had spent, every hour spent coordinating renovations, all of it had been systematically erased. But now I had the quiet power of documentation. A young woman with a ring light and a smartphone wandered past, filming snippets for her social media followers. She paused, adjusting the angle, and I realized, mid-step, that I had become an accidental background star in her TikTok. My hair brushed over my eyes as I glanced at the live stream. Someone's comment popped up. "Why is that woman outside?" My pulse thumped in response. The camera doesn't lie. Twist S6 hit me like a lightning bolt. I stayed still, carefully suppressing a laugh. The irony was delicious, but the insult remained sharp. For years, I had been overlooked, disregarded, written out of the story I had funded with my sweat and my money. And here I was, captured on a screen, a silent witness to my own erasure. Another guest, older, a family friend I'd known since childhood, peered over at me. Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Weren't you the one who helped buy this house?" he asked softly. My lips parted, then closed. Silence, my most effective statement. Twist S7. The truth weighed in the space between us. I watched as the party continued inside, laughter and clinking glasses echoing like a distorted soundtrack. I could almost hear the chorus of whispers, the unspoken verdicts, the sideways glances, the careful orchestration of appearance over reality. I pulled the door slightly open, peering back into the gathering, seeing Callista in her element, poised, radiant, seemingly adored. The way she tilted her head in a practiced gesture, offering polite smiles to guests while avoiding me, sent a chill down my spine. This wasn't just favoritism, it was a calculated narrative. I returned to my folding chair, setting my phone beside me. The garage, previously a place of punishment, now felt like a vantage point. Every sound from inside, the muffled conversation, the bursts of laughter, was a detail in the mosaic I was quietly building. I began documenting. Names, times, snippets of dialogue, gestures, each entry became a line in a ledger of invisible wrongs. I realized, if I had been erased publicly, I would record publicly. The tables were not yet turned, but the foundation for reversal was laid. At that moment, the door cracked open. Callista stepped in, wineglass in hand, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. She approached with a sweetness that reeked of calculation. "You're still sitting out here?" she asked, voice light. Her eyes scanned mine, trying to read weakness, trying to find hesitation. I leaned back, allowing my gaze to meet hers steadily. "Why don't you move along?" she added, half a tease, half a challenge. I shook my head slowly, exhaling. "No, I think this is fine," I replied evenly. "It's a nice vantage point." Her smile faltered for a split second. She had expected me to shrink, to retreat, to let her narrative go unchallenged. That faltering glance was mine to treasure. The first crack. I let it linger, subtle but undeniable. Then I leaned forward, just enough for my voice to carry without raising it, speaking directly to her while not alarming the other guests. "Callista, you keep pushing me, and I promise you, next time, you won't like what happens." Calm, precise, not threatening, but loaded with intent. My eyes were sharp, my pulse steady. Twist S5 and S6 combined in a delicate, lethal crescendo. She froze. The elegance of her posture held, but her smile thinned. She stepped back, aware that her comfortable script had been disrupted. For the first time, her aura of control wavered. I sensed the calculations in her mind. For once, she couldn't predict my next move. That alone was a subtle victory. I remembered then the first betrayal from my past, college days, late nights of balancing books for her tuition when our parents couldn't manage it. The award she later received, labeled a grant, not acknowledgement. I had covered for her, kept the secret, and she had absorbed the credit. Now, it was clear the pattern repeated itself, minimizing my contributions while elevating hers. I clenched my fist briefly in the air, testing my own restraint. Inside, the party moved on, oblivious to the tension radiating in the garage. I noticed subtle micro-expressions in family members. My brother avoiding eye contact, aunts pausing mid-laugh before turning away, distant cousins pretending to check their phones. Passive loyalty to Callista's image dominated every interaction. This reinforced my resolve. Silence had been their weapon for decades, but they had yet to account for meticulous, strategic recording of the truth. I pulled my phone closer and began a methodical entry of every event that would later serve as undeniable proof. Each file labeled, time-stamped, backed up. The physical evidence of my presence, my contributions, my reality became armor. If they wanted me to remain quiet and invisible, my response would be structured, undeniable, and unassailable. The garage's open door framed the last rays of the setting sun, painting a soft orange over my notes and phone screen. The day had started as a subtle punishment. It had morphed into a battlefield where my calm, collected mind was the most dangerous weapon. The anger, carefully moderated, rose in me like a tide. This wasn't lashing out in the heat of embarrassment. This was controlled, deliberate. Strategy hidden beneath the cloak of quiet observation. I looked back toward the house. Callista laughed inside, turning her attention to another guest, her earlier threat momentarily masked by poise, but I knew it lingered in her subconscious. My quiet warning had left its mark. I had not screamed. I had not created a scene. My power lay in restraint, in documentation, in the knowledge that when revealed, the narrative would swing irrevocably. I stood from the folding chair, straightening my jacket, allowing the shadow of evening to stretch across my figure. My lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. I wasn't leaving yet. The fight had only just entered its subtle, intelligent phase. The first battle was observation, documentation, and the planting of seeds that would sprout into undeniable reality. Inside the house, guests continued their chatter, but outside in the garage, Giselle had become something they hadn't accounted for. The quiet storm, the ledger of truth, the witness that could not be erased. The camera had recorded, the emails had documented, the receipts had proved it. Every omission, every sly compliment to Callista at my expense, every hidden slight, every erased contribution, soon all would meet its reckoning. I leaned against the frame of the garage, breath steady. My mind turned toward tomorrow, toward a subtle confrontation that would pierce the bubble of selective memory my family had built around Callista. The quiet warning was laid. Now the real strategy could unfold. They wanted me quiet, invisible, polite. What they were getting was something else entirely. You pushed me first. The garage door's soft creak echoed in my ears as I returned inside, the cool air brushing against my skin like a subtle reminder of the calm before the storm. My fingers flexed around my phone, reviewing the last screenshots and email chains I had carefully archived. Each message, each time-stamped note, fortified my resolve. I wasn't just upset anymore. This was no longer about humiliation or erasure. This was about reclaiming the truth in a house that had been rewritten without me. I paced in front of the long hallway mirror near the staircase, catching a glimpse of the woman staring back. Stronger, colder, determined. The casual ease of the party inside seemed a world away. I could hear snippets of laughter and clinking glasses, but in my own bubble, I traced the trajectory of the family's lies and omissions. Callista's smug victory, Vera's quiet complicity, the cousins' whispered nods, all recorded silently, stored neatly in my mind and on my phone. Then the sound of voices reached me. Callista's, crystal clear and saccharine. Well, I wanted something nice for Mom and Dad. After all, I did so much to get this house. I froze, my hand tightening around my wine glass until the stem almost threatened to snap. A guest tilted his head, puzzled. "Wait, didn't Giselle buy it?" he asked carefully. Callista's eyes flicked briefly to the living room entrance, the smallest trace of irritation flashing across her perfectly composed face. "She just helped a little. I was the real engine," she said, dismissing my contribution as though it were a footnote. My stomach roiled, heat rushing up my chest. Twist S8 had landed, sharp and undeniable. I felt the tension coil inside me like a spring, and for a moment I almost wanted to throw my glass to the ground. Instead, I exhaled, steadying myself, and shifted my stance. I could not let her narrative stand unchallenged. Not now, not ever. Calmly, I unlocked my phone and opened the folder I had meticulously prepared over the past months. Contracts, bank transfers, mortgage statements, every piece of proof of my financial role in the purchase, each file a reminder of reality, of effort, of truth that had been denied. I moved closer to the bar counter, my movement unhurried, deliberate. "Watch this," I murmured under my breath. I airdropped the files to the smart TV behind the bar. The screen flickered, then displayed the documents for all to see. Gasps punctuated the room, murmurs of disbelief and astonishment spread quickly. Guests exchanged looks, their polite smiles fading. Some took out phones to record, others whispered quietly to their neighbors. Twist S16 had hit, and the room's air felt electric, charged with recognition of a long-concealed truth. Callista spun on her heel, her face a mask of shock and anger. "Turn that off!" she demanded, her voice sharp, slicing through the murmurs. I stood my ground, calm but unyielding. "You erased me in words," I said, soft but firm. I reappeared in facts. The silence that followed was raw, immediate. Even Vera's footsteps faltered. My mother rushed over, hands extended as if she could physically shield the house from truth. "You're ruining everything," she hissed. I looked at her with a composed gaze. "Everything was already ruined," I replied evenly. "I just cleaned the glass so they could see it." A heavier silence fell, the kind that fills a room with undeniable tension. Memories surfaced, unbidden but vivid. The day I signed the papers in 2022, sitting alone at the title company while wiring $82,000 for the down payment, Mom had said quietly, "Just keep it quiet so Callista doesn't feel small." I had complied, hiding my involvement out of a misguided desire for family harmony. That deference had become a chain, one I was now breaking with deliberate force. Two cousins approached from the side, their eyes carefully avoiding the confrontation, but their presence a subtle sign of support. "We always knew," one said, low enough for only me to hear. "Just didn't know how to say anything." Another handed me a flash drive. "Callista asked me to delete some files from Mom's computer." "I kept a copy," they murmured. A glimmer of quiet rebellion flickered in me. More lies to unravel, more truth to reveal. Guests continued to shift and whisper, some pretending to check their phones, others caught between awkward glances. Callista's composure was unraveling in small increments, her aura of dominance now tinged with nervous irritation. I could see her calculating the next move, the hesitation in her posture, the subtle falter in her practiced smile. I realized then that my silence and meticulous preparation had done more damage than any outburst could have. Standing at the bar, my reflection in the darkened window catching the last of the daylight, I felt a sense of authority wash over me. The quiet, calculated fury I had nurtured for months had manifested into undeniable presence. I was no longer merely the overlooked contributor. I was the orchestrator of truth, the one who could turn whispers into revelations, ambiguity into clarity. Every document flashed on the screen, every proof visible to the room was a declaration. The narrative had shifted, and I had regained agency. I glanced at Callista again. She flinched slightly when our eyes met. A small, almost imperceptible tremor of awareness passed through her. The truth had pierced the veil of her assumed control. This wasn't about humiliation anymore. It was about justice, subtle yet devastating. My righteous anger had turned into strategy, and I was in command. I stepped back, letting the room absorb the shock. Conversations that once dismissed me as invisible now hesitated. Guests whispered with careful observation. I didn't need to raise my voice, didn't need to beg for acknowledgement. The documentation and timing were perfect, the room now a testament to the reality of my contributions. Every ignored smile, every omitted word, every subtle manipulation had met its reckoning. As the evening light dimmed, I realized this was not merely a victory over one party, one moment, or one individual. It was a reclamation of identity, of my rightful place within a family that had long sought to erase me. And while the confrontation had begun quietly, the ripple it created would extend far beyond this evening. I adjusted my jacket, standing tall, and let a calm confidence settle over me. I would not be passive anymore. The fight had begun, quiet but unyielding, precise and effective. Callista's stunned composure told me everything I needed to know. The narrative had been interrupted, the control wrested from her hands, and for the first time in years, she could not predict my next move. The room remained hushed, tension thick and deliberate. I took a breath, feeling the surge of empowerment. Each document, each screenshot, each carefully cataloged email was a brick in the wall I was building, a wall of undeniable truth that could not be dismantled by whispers or smiles. And I would not stop until it was fully recognized, until the reality of my efforts, my contributions, my existence was no longer subject to erasure. When they strike low. The cool night air hit me as I stepped away from the garage, phone buzzing incessantly in my hand. The party's laughter and clinking glasses felt muffled, distant, like it belonged to another life. Guests were beginning to disperse in uneasy waves, some lingering near the patio with half-empty drinks, their murmurs punctuated by nervous glances. I tried to take a deep breath, to center myself, but the screen lighting my face offered no respite. A notification blinked, a name I hadn't seen in months. Cousin Jonah. My curiosity outweighed fatigue. I tapped to open the message, scrolling through the screenshots he had sent. The family group chat titled Family House Planning unfurled on my phone, and my stomach flipped. I wasn't in it. Not a single message had included me. Instead, the thread was filled with jokes at my expense. Garage Queen. Keep her outside, equals less drama. Even my father had laughed at one of the messages, a small emoji that seemed innocuous until it appeared in this context. Twist S9 slammed into me like a punch, leaving me simultaneously stunned and furious. My pulse quickened, but my mind was sharp. The stakes were higher now, and the facade of family harmony had crumbled completely. As I digested the betrayal, another message from Jonah appeared, a screenshot from Callista's private texting. Her words were venomous, yet calculated. She's unstable. She's had therapy for years. You all know how reactive she can be. Twist S13 landed with precision. My hands went numb, my chest tightening as I read and reread the words. They weren't just deleting my presence, they were actively defaming me. My own family was weaponizing my mental health history as justification for exclusion, twisting facts to support a narrative that erased me completely. A cold fury replaced the initial shock. No tears, just a clarity that felt almost serene in its focus. I opened my legal folder on the phone, beginning to draft an email that would mark the first of many calculated moves. Subject: Formal notice regarding defamation property misrepresentation. I copied my attorney, ensuring the message carried both authority and record. The act was meticulous, deliberate. This was no outburst of emotion. This was strategy in motion. I walked back toward the house, the crunch of gravel beneath my heels punctuating each measured step. Vera appeared, visibly shaking, the flickering patio lights casting shadows across her worried face. "You're blowing things out of proportion," she whispered, almost pleading. I held her gaze, calm yet firm. "You let them build a world where I'm crazy, and they're golden. Let's see how the courts feel about that," I said softly, letting each word sink in. Her eyes widened slightly, a silent acknowledgement of my seriousness. A memory surfaced unbidden, my therapist's words echoing from months ago. Sometimes boundaries aren't walls, they're escape plans. Suddenly, it was clear. This was no longer about reconciliation. It was about reclaiming power, restoring truth, and securing a version of reality that acknowledged my role, my contributions, and my dignity. With a decisive exhale, I approached the microphone, still set up in the backyard. The night had deepened, lanterns glowing softly, and a few lingering guests now turned their attention toward me. Their faces, curious and uncertain, mirrored the shift in the room's energy. I cleared my throat, letting my voice carry over the soft hum of the night. Thank you for attending this event. It's a lovely house, isn't it? I'm Giselle, the one who paid for it. The words hung in the air, sharp, undeniable. Gasps spread across the crowd. Callista's lips parted, a desperate attempt to interject, but the moment had passed. The truth had been voiced publicly, and her calculated smirk faltered. I paused, scanning the audience. Faces shifted uncomfortably. My cousins exchanged subtle, supportive nods. Even the guests who had earlier whispered judgments now looked to me with a mixture of awe and recognition. I had turned the tables without raising my voice, letting facts speak louder than any confrontation ever could. I know some of you might be surprised, I continued. Some of you have probably heard stories that don't reflect reality. But tonight, let's remember what actually happened. I invested in this home, I kept the family afloat, and I did it not for recognition, but because I love this family. Yet, I won't allow lies or omissions to rewrite history. My tone was calm, yet it carried a weight that could not be ignored. Callista's expression twisted from disbelief to anger. She muttered something under her breath, glancing toward my parents. Vera's hands twitched, unsure whether to intervene or to let the moment unfold. The subtle, quiet power of truth had shifted the room's balance, and I felt the wave of control settle into my chest. I wasn't just reclaiming acknowledgement. I was exposing the intricate lattice of deceit and indifference that had been carefully maintained for years. The night stretched on, but I stood resolute. Each document, each public statement, each recorded proof of reality reinforced my position. I was no longer passive, no longer subject to the family's convenient reinterpretations. The dynamic had changed. The quiet daughter had transformed into a deliberate, undeniable force of accountability. By the time the final guests trickled toward the door, whispers of the evening's revelations had spread. I walked past Callista, her gaze avoiding mine, as if the public acknowledgement had stripped her of the armor she had long worn. I felt no satisfaction in anger, only a steady, righteous clarity. I had confronted the lies and put them on display, letting truth do the work that confrontation alone could never achieve. I stepped onto the patio, the night air wrapping around me once again, and felt the weight of the evening settle. The house, the party, the familial tension, all had been catalysts. But tonight marked the turning point. The final act, though not complete, had begun. Each calculated action, each carefully documented piece of reality, set the stage for what was next. I exhaled, feeling the faint release of tension, yet my mind raced ahead. The battle was far from over. My family's deceit had been revealed, their narratives challenged, and their control disrupted. And while some doors had been closed to me for years, tonight, I had cracked them wide open. I could see the path forward, deliberate, unwavering, and precise. The night sky above Barton Creek seemed darker somehow, yet clearer. Each lantern glimmered like a witness to what had transpired. I knew the final confrontation was still to come, but for the first time in years, I felt the certainty that I would step into it on my terms. No apologies, no hesitations, only truth. The final act. The tension hung thick in the backyard, mingling with the fading warmth of the Texas evening. After my mic drop, the world felt both heavy and electric, as if the air itself had changed, acknowledging the undeniable shift. Guests murmured quietly to one another, some offering hesitant applause, others frozen in stunned silence, processing what had just transpired. I remained on the patio, observing, detached yet alert, every eye and every reaction feeding into the careful mental map I was constructing. Tonight was not just about confrontation, it was about reclamation, about redefining what was mine. I took a slow, deliberate step back into the house, my heels clicking softly against the polished hardwood. The living room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves recoiled at the weight of truth being broadcasted across the backyard. And then he appeared. My father, Orion, his face a storm of anger and disbelief. He intercepted me near the foyer, his hands rigid at his sides. "You will apologize and take that back. Now," he barked, his voice cutting through the quiet chatter, demanding obedience, control, restitution. Twist S10 hit in full force. The demand was raw, primal, the classic attempt to silence a daughter who dared defy the family narrative. I turned to him, calm, almost eerily composed. "You sold my silence for Callista's image. That deal's over," I said, letting each word hang like a gavel in the charged air. His jaw tightened, his eyes flaring with disbelief as guests leaned in, sensing the gravity of the confrontation. For the first time publicly, he raised his voice, attempting to command a reality that had already shifted beneath his feet. But my resolve was unyielding. No raised tone, no intimidation could undo what had already begun. A small movement near the kitchen caught my eye. My aunt, older and typically unassuming, stepped forward and handed me an envelope. Vera's familiar handwriting adorned it, a letter from years past. Inside, the words unfolded like a secret revelation, praise for my sacrifices, a request for discretion so Callista doesn't feel small, and a line that pierced deeper than any argument. "You're the only reason we survived the foreclosure." Twist S14 struck me with clarity. The hidden acknowledgement that had been buried, unspoken, now lay bare in my hands. I felt the full spectrum of grief and vindication in one measured breath. With deliberate steps, I reclaimed the microphone, the familiar weight in my hand anchoring me. "You wanted the truth? Here it is. I bought this house. I funded your image, and now I'm reclaiming mine," I announced. My voice, steady and resolute, cut through the tense air, silencing any murmur before it could form. Guests froze, taking in the words, the significance of the claim, the unshakable authority in the one delivering it. Callista's expression faltered, the veneer of control cracking as her carefully constructed narrative dissolved before their eyes. She tried to respond, to salvage her story, faltering at each attempt. "I didn't ask for the money. I didn't know." Her words stumbled, inadequate, failing to land against the undeniable evidence of truth displayed before everyone. Guests' glances shifted away, some muttering under their breath, tired of the endless charade. The act was over. The pretense dissolved under the weight of transparency. Vera, usually the silent observer, remained seated in the kitchen chair, stunned. Her attempt to mediate, to soften the blow, was nowhere in sight. I approached her, quiet, yet deliberate. "You wanted to protect her from feeling small, and now you've made her look small on her own," I said softly. The words, precise and measured, carried the combined weight of years of patience and suppressed emotion. She said nothing, absorbing the truth in the stillness of the room, the magnitude of what had been hidden laid bare. I felt the last threads of tension coil and release as I turned toward the front door. My decision was deliberate, my exit symbolic. I didn't look back. There were no tears, no trembling hands, no need for validation from those who had overlooked and misrepresented me for years. The house, the stage of betrayal, omission, and falsehood, remained behind me. What I carried was intangible, but infinitely more valuable: truth, agency, and a reclaiming of my own narrative. The drive away from Barton Creek was quiet, the city lights reflecting in the windshield, a mosaic of the life I had built for myself outside the shadow of family deception. The engine hummed beneath me, a steady, reassuring rhythm, echoing the resolve in my chest. Each mile distanced me further from the events of the night, yet every word, every revelation remained vivid, etched into memory. I thought of the family I had loved and the complex web of loyalty, denial, and ambition they had spun. The pain was real, the betrayal undeniable, but so too was my liberation. Even in the solitude of the car, I reflected on the letters, the contracts, the silent witnesses of my efforts. Each was a testament not only to what I had done, but to what I refused to let be erased. The realization settled. Freedom wasn't leaving the house behind. It was leaving behind the role they had assigned to me. The daughter who acquiesced, the helper who was unseen. Tonight, that narrative ended. As the streets of Austin blurred past, I allowed a small smile, not for revenge, not for triumph, but for the clarity of self-possession. The long shadows of familial expectation no longer dictated my actions. I could inhabit my own space, define my own worth, and navigate life unshackled from misrepresentation. The home, with all its walls, memories, and misplaced accolades, was theirs. I had something far more enduring: the truth. The night deepened, quiet now, except for the steady hum of the tires on asphalt. Each street lamp flickered, casting short-lived light across my path, echoing the fleeting nature of appearances. The moment was mine. I had reclaimed agency, authority, and dignity. And though some truths were left unresolved, some wounds unhealed, the final act of this chapter, this confrontation, this revelation, had been executed with precision, integrity, and unwavering resolve. The horizon hinted at the promise of dawn, of new beginnings beyond the reach of family politics and betrayal. I exhaled deeply, the night cool against my skin, and felt the weight of years lift just enough to leave space for forward motion. The culmination of deceit and suppression had ended in transparency, and for the first time, I could breathe fully without reservation. The truth was mine to carry, and in it, the quiet, unshakable victory of self-possession, the weight of leaving. The week after the house confrontation, the city felt different, quieter, more pliable, as if the world had rearranged itself around me. My apartment, modest yet sun-filled, was my sanctuary 45 minutes away from Barton Creek. I moved slowly through the space, unwrapping boxes of new linens, adjusting pillows, adding splashes of teal and mustard that had no place in the rigid palette of the house I had left behind. For the first time in months, I arranged things entirely to my taste. Each object was a small rebellion, a claim of territory that no one could deny or rewrite. Morning sunlight filtered through the blinds as I opened the window, inhaling the crisp air. The city buzzed faintly below, but in my little haven, I felt a calm clarity, one that no lecture or whispered slight could disrupt. I sipped my coffee, notebook open on the table, jotting observations from the party and the fallout. I replayed scenes in my mind, not with bitterness, but with analytical precision, understanding the mechanisms of exclusion and the nuances of their deception. In a quiet corner, the echo of my mic drop lingered, a private testament to the authority I had reclaimed. The doorbell rang mid-morning. I set my coffee aside and opened the door to find a familiar envelope resting against the mat. Vera's handwriting swept across the front, hesitant, careful, almost pleading. My hand hovered for a moment before I tore it open, the weight of what it might contain pressing in on me. Inside, the paper smelled faintly of ink and time, a message from the mother who had hidden truths to protect her other daughter. "You've always been stronger than we knew," the letter began. "Maybe we leaned too hard on that." Reading it thrice, I felt an odd mix of relief and weariness. It wasn't an apology, but it acknowledged my fortitude, the sacrifices made invisible for years. I did not respond immediately. There was no rush to grant absolution. The letter was a quiet acknowledgement, a fragile bridge over waters long churned by conflict. The week unfolded with an odd rhythm, my phone buzzing incessantly with notifications about the viral video of the party. Clips of my mic drop circulated under titles like "The House Her Family Tried to Erase Her From" and "Daughter Reclaims Her Own Story." Comments flooded in. "She's a hero." Mic drop moment. Finally, someone said it. Twist S15 took effect. The court of public opinion had shifted in my favor. I watched as Callista deleted her social media accounts in a flurry of panic. Vera posted a vague status acknowledging nothing, and I felt a quiet satisfaction. Not vengeance, clarity, a reclamation of narrative. A call from my father broke the morning's rhythm. His voice, hesitant, fractured. "I don't know when I became a coward, but I was one." I held my breath for a beat, measuring each syllable. "I accept the truth," I said evenly, "not excuses." He swallowed something heavy into silence, then admitted, "I'll start with that." It was not healing. Not yet. But it was the first brick in a bridge that might someday span the divide between our fractured family and the reality I now inhabited. In the evenings, I began exploring other spaces of belonging. A private online support group for women disinherited or overlooked by their families became a virtual refuge. The Garage Queen message board welcomed my story with open arms. A moderator's note read, "You're not alone. We've been in the garage, too." For the first time in years, I was visible beyond the eyes that had ignored me, and it was a lightness I hadn't known in decades. I started reclaiming rituals I had once observed with them, now reshaped to suit the family I chose. Sunday dinners with friends, personal celebrations for achievements big and small, quiet morning coffee on the balcony with someone who genuinely cared. Each event, each shared moment, became a miniature ceremony of restoration. Where the family had sought to minimize, I amplified joy, recognition, and care for myself and those who mattered without pretense or hierarchy. On a particularly quiet evening, sitting on the balcony with a journal in my lap, I reflected on the long arc of these months. "I left the house they built to become the woman I built," I wrote, the words settling into the page like careful bricks. Sometimes the price of peace is everything, and it's worth it. I did not seek revenge. The satisfaction came not from the downfall of others, but from the truth reclaimed, from the agency returned, from the ability to define my life on my terms. Even as the city lights blinked into life below, I thought of the garage, the initial slight, the family that had overlooked me. They could inhabit the house, revel in their curated narrative, but the truth, tangible, undeniable, and unaltered, was mine. The weight of leaving had never felt lighter. I was finally unburdened, walking into a life of authenticity and quiet triumph. I lingered by the window, letting the night settle, the cool air brushing against my face. A sense of closure, tempered with awareness that some wounds would always remain, settled within me. Life would continue, as messy and beautiful as ever, but I carried it with honesty. The small apartment, the reclaimed stories, the chosen family, they were all mine. The past was accounted for, the present claimed, and the future awaited, unshackled by omission or deceit. They gave me the garage. I took the truth. "Guess who ended up with more space?" I whispered to the night, a private victory, echoing off the walls of my reclaimed life. The city hummed quietly, bearing witness to a woman who had endured, observed, and emerged whole. As we close this story, it's a reminder that standing up for yourself doesn't always mean confrontation. It can mean reclaiming your truth and setting boundaries. How would you handle being erased by those closest to you? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more eye-opening family stories and real-life twists you won't want to miss.